No alien would claim her, so they gave the princess to a human debris. Fluttered from the ceiling as the ancient elevator groaned to a halt, Raylan Corvus adjusted the satchel of salvaged drone parts slung over his shoulder, grimacing at the ostentatious gold doors ahead. The gleaming metal contrasted sharply with the dust coating his worn boots and the permanent grease stains embedded in his fingernails. "State your business," demanded a disembodied voice, the accent dripping with Vertalis aristocracy. "Parts trader," Raylan answered flatly. "Got a fresh shipment of Class C propulsion modulators. Black market price is 12,000 credits. I'll take 10 if you don't ask." "Where they came from?" The doors slid open with a melodramatic hiss. The cybernetic implant replacing his left eye rapidly adjusted to the blinding light of the grand chamber. Raylan squinted, his remaining human eye taking in the spectacle. "You're late," whispered a mechanical voice in his Mindiva. The ancient artificial intelligence housed in his cybernetic eye and severely underdressed Raylan ignored the AI's commentary. His attention caught by the massive gathering of galactic nobility arranged in a perfect semicircle. Their elaborate costumes and genetic modifications made them look like exotic birds, some with metallic skin, others with additional limbs or eyes, all wearing expressions of disdain as they noticed his entrance. "A human?" someone muttered with disgust. "Who let this primitive creature in here?" Brillen's hand instinctively moved to the concealed pulse pistol at his hip. His gaze darted around the chamber, identifying 27 escape routes, 18 potential weapons, and at least 50 ways to die. Painfully, something's wrong, Iva whispered in his mind. "This isn't a parts auction, my database bank suggests. This is a Vertalis ritual of refusal." At the center of the chamber stood a crystalline podium with a hovering projection of a royal seal. The throne sphere of Vertalis, surrounded by 7 stars behind it. An elderly official draped in ceremonial robes cleared his throat. "Representatives of the galactic houses," the official announced, his voice enhanced by acoustic amplifiers. "We proceed with the 7th offering of Princess Nera Tebus, heir to the throne sphere of Vertales." Raylan froze. He'd stumbled into something far more complex than a black market. Exchange of princess marriage auctions were archaic even by Outer Rim standards. Scanning Ivan formed him official records indicate Princess Nara has been paralyzed for 23 standard years following exposure to an unidentified artifact. Her mental faculties remain intact, possibly enhanced. She's been offered 6 times previously. All suitors declined. The crowd parted as a floating stasis pod hovered into the chamber. Through the transparent top, Raylan glimpsed a woman unlike any he'd encountered. In his travels across 17 systems, her skin was a deep violet that seemed to absorb and reflect light. Simultaneously, silver hair cascaded around her face like liquid mercury. Her features were striking: high cheekbones, full lips, and a jawline that could cut glass even in stasis. Her beauty was arresting, her perfect figure preserved in a gown of iridescent material that shifted colors with each subtle movement of the pod. But it was her eyes that captured Raylan's attention, wide open, alert, and a startling shade of silver that matched her hair. Those eyes didn't belong to someone paralyzed. They burned with intelligence and something else: awareness. "Noble houses," the official continued, "before you lies Princess Nara Tves, 27 standard years of age, sole heir to the Vertalis bloodline. Her mind remains functional, her genetics uncompromised, the terms remain unchanged. Marriage grants access to Vertalis holdings, but requires lifelong care of the princess." Raylan moved closer, curiosity overriding caution. The royal houses whispered among themselves, their expressions ranging from pity to revulsion. "House Draxus declines," announced a blue-skinned diplomat. "House Tarn Tenos declines," followed another. One by one, representatives stepped forward to formally reject the princess. With each refusal, Raylan noticed a flicker of something, not sorrow but calculation, in Nara's unwavering gaze. "Your heart rate has increased by 27%. Iba noted, "Are you experiencing attraction to the mobilized female?" "Shut up," Raylan muttered, stepping closer to the pod. He'd reached the inner circle, now close enough to see the slight rise and fall of Nara's chest beneath the translucent fabric of her gown. The stasis field hummed with complex energy patterns that his cybernetic eye automatically analyzed. "Interesting," Eva said. "The stasis field isn't medical. It's containment technology. Typically used for volatile energy sources, Raylan placed a hand on the pod, feeling the vibration of the field against his palm. Something wasn't right. The technology was overkill for life support. Then it happened. "Can you hear me?" The voice wasn't Aiva's familiar mechanical tone. It was feminine, melodic, and unmistakably coming from inside his head. Raylan jerked back his hand, leaving the pod as if burned. He stared at the princess, whose eyes had shifted slightly to lock directly with his eye. "Asked if you could hear me?" The voice came again, tinged with amusement. Raylan glanced around. No one else seemed to have heard anything. Head tapped his temple, where the cybernetic implant connected to his brain. Loud and clear, he thought back, uncertain if this was communication or hallucination. Fascinating, no one has ever answered before. The official cleared his throat. "House. Morton declines house. Keith declines. They don't see your value." Raylan thought, surprised by his own response. "And you do." Her mental voice carried a hint of challenge. "I see someone trapped." I recognized the look. "Would you free me?" The chamber had grown quiet. Raylan realized with a start that every eye was on him, the dirty human standing with his hand on the royal stasis pod. "You," the official addressed him with visible disdain. "State your house in intention." Raylan straightened his posture. Years of negotiating with ruthless salvage dealers kicking in. Raylan Corvus, independent engineer from 109. Laughter rippled through the assembly. The official's lips curled in contempt. "This is a royal proceeding, not a parts market. Remove yourself." "Ask for my hand," Nara's voice urged in his mind. "What? Ask to marry me right now. I'll take her." Raylan announced, his voice cutting through the laughter. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. The official's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "You what?" "I'll marry the princess," Raylan repeated louder this time. "That's what this circus is about, isn't it? Finding someone to take her off your hands?" The official sputtered. "Preposterous. You're a human salvager. You have no standing, no bloodline, no ulterior motives." Raylan interrupted. "Unlike everyone else here at all." Diplomat with metallic skin stepped forward. "This is an insult to the royal bloodline of Verilis. A human taking a princess. Don't back down." Nara's voice whispered in his mind. "They can't refuse. If I accept." "Why do you wish to marry Princess Nara?" the official demanded clearly. Stalling for time, Raylan shrugged, hand still on the pod. "You're the only one here not trying to use me. Why not?" he said, directing his words to Nara rather than the official. Perfect answer. Her voice approved. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted objections. Advisors huddled in urgent consultation, and security drones hovered closer. "This is illegal," insisted the blue-skinned diplomat. Actually interjected a small figure in judicial robes. "The ritual of refusal bylaws contain no restrictions on species or status, only the requirement that the princess herself must accept." All eyes turned to the stasis pod. The official pressed his hand against a control panel, activating a communication system. "Princess Nara," he said loudly, "do you accept this human as your husband?" For several seconds nothing happened. Then a holographic display materialized above the pod, showing a single word. "Yes." "Impossible," the metallic diplomat hissed. "She can't possibly." "The princess has accepted," the judicial figure announced. "By law, the ritual is complete." The official's face drained of color. "This is irregular. There are protocols, preparations which you've had 23 years to arrange." Raylan pointed out. "I assume you've prepared for every possibility except someone actually saying yes. They never expected anyone to want me." Nero's voice confirmed in his mind. "Especially not someone outside their control." AIV's voice cut through his thoughts. "Raylan, your actions have just made you the legal spouse of the heir to the most powerful technological empire in the quadrant. Calculating potential assassination attempts. Number exceeds computational capacity." The room had devolved into chaos. Royal representatives argued loudly. Security personnel looked confused. And beneath it all, Raylan sensed something shifting in the political undercurrents. "The union is sealed," the official finally announced, his voice strained. "Raylan Corvus, you are now bound to Princess Nara, TVs of Veralis, the royal stasis pod, and all necessary equipment will be transferred to your custody. Rail I nodded, trying to look like someone who'd planned this all along rather than a man who just made the most impulsive decision of his life. Don't worry. Nara's voice soothed in his mind. I've been planning this for longer than you can imagine. As the formalities concluded and arrangements were hastily made to transfer the princess to Raylan's custody, he noticed something that no one else seemed to see within the stasis pod. Nara's fingertips twitched, ever so slightly, the first movement her body had made in decades. What have I gotten myself into? Raylan muttered under his breath. The beginning of everything. Nara's voice answered in the end of an empire built on lies as they prepared to leave the chamber. Royal officials swarming around them with documents and instructions. Raylan caught sight of a figure watching from the shadows, a robed individual, whose face remained hidden but whose posture radiated pure fury. That's the one who cursed me, Nero's voice whispered, and he's just realized his greatest mistake. The mobile habitat lurched sideways, throwing Raylan against the burnished wall of the command deck. He steadied himself against a control panel, absently noting how the pristine surfaces now bore his fingerprints. Small imperfections marking his presence in this immaculate mechanical palace. Compensating for gravitational fluctuations, announced the habitat's AI in a voice calibrated to sound soothing. Even after 3 weeks, the pretentious, fertilous programming irritated him. Everything here was designed to remind him he didn't belong. Raylan wiped a smear of engine grease from his forehead and stared through the viewport at the rust-cold wasteland of Tigran's Rift. The palace on 3 wheels, as locals called it, crawled across the barren landscape like an enormous metallic beetle. A self-contained environment that housed Nara's stasis chamber, and enough for Talus technology to purchase a small moon. Are you thinking about modifying the suspension again? Nara's voice slipped into his mind, familiar now after 21 days of constant communication. Third time's the charm, Raylan muttered aloud, still adjusting to their telepathic connection. This terrain is shredding the lower stabilizers. You could use the anti-grav boosters and drain our power reserves by 80%, he countered, dropping into the captain's chair. Not a great idea in bandit territory. He sensed her amusement rippling through their connection. So practical, the Royal Engineers preferred theoretical elegance over functionality. That's why they're royal, and I'm scrap. Raylan replied, pulling up diagnostic readouts on the habitat systems. The cybernetic implant in his left eye processed the data streams faster than his human eye could follow. Speaking of which, we're 3 kilometers from the trading outpost. Any last request? Before I mingle with the locals? Bring me back a sensation, she requested, her mental voice taking on the playful quality he'd come to recognize. Something gritty. This had become their ritual. Each time Rayan ventured out, Nara asked him to bring back an experience, a taste, a texture, a sound, something her paralyzed body had never known. He'd return to her stasis chamber, place his hand on the neural connector, and share the memory directly. Gritty, he repeated, smiling despite himself. I can manage that. Raylan secured the habitat's defenses, then made his way to the central chamber. Nara's stasis pod occupied the center of the room, suspended in a field of blue-tinted energy. The stark white walls curved around her like protective hands, monitors tracking every microscopic change in her condition. She looked different now than she had at the ritual of refusal. The royal handlers had removed her ceremonial attire, replacing it with a simple, white bodysuit that monitored her vital signs. Her silver hair fanned out around her like a metallic halo, contrasting with her violet skin, which seemed to pulse with a subtle inner light. Her eyes remained open and alert, following him as he approached. Raylan pressed his palm against the neural connector beside her pod. The familiar sensation of their minds connecting washed over him like diving into warm water that gradually grew deeper and more complex. Be careful today, she cautioned, her concern evident through their link. I've been monitoring communications. 3 ships broke orbit this morning without filing departure protocols. Shadow conclave? He asked, his body tensing instinctively. Possibly they're growing more suspicious. Raylan nodded grimly over. The past weeks Nara had educated him about the factions within the Galactic Council, especially the Shadow Conclave, a secretive group that had manipulated interstellar politics for centuries. According to Nara, they were responsible for her accident with the ancient artifact. I'll keep a low profile, he promised, his thumb absently tracing circles on the connector. Just supplies and information, nothing flashy. You're inherently flashy, she teased a human with a cybernetic eye married to a paralyzed princess. People notice I'll wear a hood. He deadpanned. The corner of Nara's mouth twitched upward, a minuscule movement that sent a jolt of excitement through their connection. Raylan's eye implant immediately captured and analyzed the motion you moved, he said, staring at her lips. Did I? Her mental voice sounded genuinely surprised, just a twitch. But Ryland's physiological responses indicate excitement. Ava interrupted, its mechanical voice echoing in his mind. Your connection with the princess is affecting your neural architecture. Your AI is eavesdropping. Nara observed, her mental tone tinged with amusement. Ava has boundary issues, Raylan muttered. And apparently a death wish. I merely observe that each neural connection between you strengthens synaptic pathways that previously lay dormant. Ava continued, undeterred. You're beginning to change human Rail, and severed the connection with Nara's pod, feeling the familiar sense of loss as her presence receded from his mind. Because you inspire me, machine, he responded to Ava, but they both knew it was more than that. The trading outpost of Karth's Landing sprawled across a rocky plateau, a chaotic assemblage of prefabricated structures, repurposed ship holes and makeshift stalls, criminals, traders, refugees, and opportunists from 17 systems congregated here. Beyond their of council regulations, Raylan navigated the crowded marketplace with practiced ease, hood pulled low over his cybernetic eye. He disabled the more conspicuous functions, but the silver iris still attracted unwanted attention. His shopping list was practical stabilizer parts, protein synthesizers, medical supplies for Nara's pod. Well, if it isn't the Princess Keeper. Draw. A raspy voice from his left Ren's hand moved to his concealed pulse pistolas. He turned to face Drab Cole, a Sidian smuggler with a reputation for selling information to the highest bidder. Thelian's translucent skin revealed the outline of his 3 hearts, all beating at different rates. Cole Raylan acknowledged with a curt nod. Still breathing, I see, unlike your predecessor, Cole said, falling into step beside him. The last man who tried to care for the Tivist girl lasted 8 days before his ship experienced a catastrophic life support failure. His translucent skin rippled with what passed for amusement among Sejans. Fascinating, Raylan replied flatly. Did you want something specific or just the pleasure of my company? Cole glanced around furtively before leaning closer. Word is there's a bounty on you, specifically on your eyeshadow. Conclave wants that tech, 50,000 credits. No questions asked. Raylan maintained his casual pace, but his mind raced. And you're telling me this out of the goodness of your 3 hearts? I'm telling you because someone just outbid him. Cole whispered. 100, Surzu 0 to keep you alive and inform you of something called the Keton artifact. Mean anything to you? The name sent a jolt through Raylan's implant. Iva immediately began searching its databases while Raylan kept his expression neutral. Should it? Cole shrugged, his semi-transparent shoulders. Not my business, but whoever wants you to know about it has serious resources. The payment came through quantum lock channels, council-level security. Raylan slipped a small credit chip into Cole's hand. Thanks for the warning. One more thing, the smuggler added, his voice dropping. Even lower, 3 council hunters arrived this morning. Black Ops. They're not here for the scenery back at the habitat. Raylan rushed to Nara's chamber, his mind buzzing with questions. The Keton artifact, could it be connected to whatever had paralyzed her? And why would someone want him to know about it? He placed his hand on the neural connector, feeling the now familiar sensation of their minds aligning. Nara's presence rushed into his consciousness with unusual urgency. They're coming, she warned without preamble. I've detected 3 pursuit craft approaching from the South Council. Hunters, Raylan confirmed quickly. Activating the habitat's defense systems, Cole warned me. But there's something else. Does the name Keton artifact mean anything to you? The shock that radiated through their connection nearly knocked him off his feet. Images flashed between them, a crystalline object pulsing. With dark energy, a chamber deep beneath the Verilis capital, screams echoing through marble halls. Where did you hear that name? Nara demanded, her mental voice trembling. Anonymous tip, Raylan explained quickly. Someone wants me to know about it. The Keton artifact is what paralyzed me, she revealed, but it's more than that. It's a key to something the Shadow Conclave has been searching for centuries. What does it unlock? The habitat's alarms blared as the defense systems detected the approaching hunters. Raylan, curse torn between the need to prepare for attack and the revelations flowing through their mental link. The paralysis wasn't an accident. Nara continued, her thoughts racing. The artifact was designed to identify and neutralize psychic potential. When I touched it as a child, it recognized something in me that terrified the Conclave. Your abilities, Raylan surmised, rapidly programming evasive maneuvers into the habitat's navigation system. Yes, but not just typical psychic abilities. Something older. Something connected to the founding of the Council itself. The habitat lurched as its massive treads engaged, propelling them away from the hunter's approach. Vector Raylan worked, feverishly splitting his attention between their escape and Nara's revelations. The artifact didn't just paralyze my body. It contained my growing power while allowing my mind to develop, a strange mixture of fear and wonder. Colored. Her thoughts, they never expected me to find someone who could hear me, who could help me break free. Why tell me this now? Raylan asked, sealing the habitat's outer hatches. Because the hunters aren't just after you. They've realized our connection is weakening the artifact's hold. They're here to terminate both of us. The first impact rocked the habitat, sending Raylan crashing into a control panel. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye as he struggled back to his feet. IBA deploy counter. Measures, he shouted, rushing back to Nara's chamber, calculating optimal response. The AI replied. The second impact targeted the habitat's propulsion system, sending it skidding across the rocky terrain. Raylan braced himself against Nara's stasis pod, which remained eerily stable amid the chaos, protected by its own independent field generators. The central stabilizer is failing. Nero reported, her consciousness seemingly connected to the habitat systems, root power from the tertiary cooling units. Raylan complied, marveling at how naturally they worked together, now his hands executing the technical adjustments her mind conceived. 6 weeks ago, he'd been a solitary salvager. Now he was fighting council hunters alongside a paralyzed princess who could access his mind. The habitat shuddered to a halt behind a massive rock formation, temporarily shielded from direct fire. Raylan checked the external cameras, counting 3 sleek black vessels circling overhead like predatory birds. They'll deploy ground troops next, near a predicted standard Conclave protocol. How do you know so much about their tactics? Raylan asked. Preparing the habitat's defensive turrets, because while my body lay paralyzed, my mind wandered freely through the Council's networks. I've been gathering intelligence for 23 years, waiting for what? For you. The simple declaration hung between them. As Raylan initiated the neural connection again, diving deeper than ever before into their shared consciousness. This time he felt something different, a door, opening to areas of Nara's mind previously closed to him. He gasped as knowledge flooded his awareness. Engineering principles beyond his training. Tactical analyses of Council weaknesses, coordinates to secret Conclave facilities. With each piece of information came a corresponding change in his perception, as if new neural pathways were forming in real time. I need to show you something, Nero whispered in his mind. Something I've never shared with anyone. Image crystallized in their shared consciousness, a vision of a possible future in it. Nara stood beside him, her body vibrant and alive, her hand extended toward a massive fleet of council ships that shattered like glass before her power. This is what they fear. She explained, not just that I might walk again, but what I might become. And what is that? Raylan asked, both terrified and fascinated. Free. The connection between them intensified, growing almost painfully bright. Raylan felt something shift within. His cybernetic implant as AIV integrated with Nara's consciousness, creating a 3-way link that expanded his awareness exponentially. Enemy forces. Deploying AIVA, announced 12 humanoid units, heavy weaponry. We need to move, Raylan said reluctantly, preparing to break the connection. Wait, Nara urged, there's something else, something I fear more than the hunters. What, that if I regain mobility, I'll lose this expanded consciousness, that the price of walking again will be losing who I've become? Her mental voice trembled with vulnerability. Physical freedom in exchange for mental limitations. Raylan placed both hands on the neural connector, pouring all his conviction into their link. I didn't marry you for what you could do or be. I married you for who you are. Whatever form that takes. Her silver eyes widened slightly. and through their connection he felt a surge of emotion, unlike anything he'd experienced before. A mixture of gratitude, determination, and something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. "Then let's show the Shadow Conclave what a real partnership looks like," she responded, her mental voice hardening with resolve. "I'll guide the habitat's defenses, you prepare the counterattack." As they broke contact, Rylan noticed something remarkable. On the stasis pod's monitors, Nara's neural activity had increased by 300%, and her right hand had curled into a fist. Alarms blared through the ancient space station as Raylan dragged the stasis pod through a maze of corroded corridors. Sparks showered from damaged power conduits overhead, hissing against the pod's protective field. The abandoned Vertil's research outpost, once a pinnacle of technological advancement, now served as their desperate last refuge. Status report. Raylan demanded. His breathing labored as he manually hauled the Haftanon life support. System 3 Hunter vessels have docked in the eastern quadrant. Ava reported 12 armed operatives approaching from multiple vectors. Estimated time until contact 4 minutes 17 seconds. The central lab is 200 m ahead. Nara's voice guided in his mind. "We need to reach the primary power core. Bit busy staying alive at the moment." Raylan grunted, his augmented muscles straining after escaping the ambush at Tigran's rift. They'd fled to this derelict station hoping to find technology that might help reverse Nair's condition, only to discover the hunters had anticipated their move. The stasis pod snagged on a twisted floor plate. Raylan cursed, readjusting his grip on the guidance handles. 2 weeks of constant pursuit had worn him down to raw nerves, and survival instinct. His face was stubbled with uneven growth. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and a fresh scar ran from his right temple to his jaw, a parting gift from their last narrow escape. "Turn left at the junction," Nara instructed. "The station's schematics indicate a maintenance shaft that should provide temporary cover." Rylan veered left, shouldering through a partially collapsed doorway. The maintenance shaft beyond was cramped but intact, barely wide enough for the pod. He muscled it through, wincing as the metal side scraped against exposed wiring. "They're tracking the pod's energy signature." Aiva warned, "Conventional evasion tactics will be ineffective." Raylan positioned the stasis pod against the far wall, then slumped beside it, gulping air into his burning lungs through the transparent cover. Nara's eyes met his, alert, concerned, determined. Over the past weeks, her condition had changed subtly but unmistakably. More frequent muscle spasms, increased brain activity. Micro movements of her fingers and facial muscles had placed his palm against the neural connector, establishing their link. The familiar sensation of their minds merging washed over him, no longer disorienting but comforting, like returning. You're exhausted?" She observed, her mental voice tinged with worry. "I've been worse," he lied, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. "Eva run diagnostics on the pod's power systems." "How much longer?" "Until critical failure, approximately 48 hours. At current consumption rates," the AI responded. "Less. If sustaining damage, we need to reach the central laboratory," Nara insisted. According to the station's archives, it contained prototype technology for neural interface augmentation. "If we can adapt it to your cybernetic implant, we might be able to disrupt the artifact's binding protocol. And if we can't?" Rylan asked, checking his pulse pistol's charge level, barely 20% remaining. "Then we die here," she answered simply. "But I won't go back to being their prisoner." A distant explosion shook the station, dislodging fragments of ceiling panels. Raylan gripped the pod's handles, ready to move again. "Primary security protocols breached," Ava announced. "Hunter advanced teams have accessed the station's central systems. They're attempting to initiate emergency decompression." Nero warned, her consciousness already interfacing with the station's ancient computers. "I can delay them, but not indefinitely." Rail and dragged the pod back into the corridor, following Nara's mental directions through the labyrinthine structure. Every junction looked identical. Decay and neglect had erased most identifying markers decades ago. Only Nara's perfect recall of the station schematics kept them moving toward their target. "How do you know this place so well?" Rylan asked, grunting, as he navigated a particularly steep incline. "I was brought here as a child." She explained, memories flowing through their connection, clinical white rooms, emotionless researchers, the glint of strange instruments. "This is where they first tested the artifact on me, where they discovered what I could become." Ren felt her remembered terror as if it were his own. The helplessness of Achild strapped to an examination table surrounded by council scientists, whose curiosity outweighed their compassion. "We're not letting that happen again," he promised, his jaw clenching. They reached a massive set of blast doors, then tranced to the central laboratory. The control panel beside it was dark, its power long since failed. "I need Toby past the security lock," Raylan said, pulling tools from his belt pouch. "Keep monitoring the hunters' positions. They've split into 3 teams." Nero reported, 2 approaching our location, 1 securing their extraction route. Rail worked quickly, his enhanced eye analyzing the ancient circuitry. He stripped wires with his teeth-reconnected power nodes and improvised a bypass using components. From his own equipment, the doors shuttered, then reluctantly parted a half-meter, enough to squeeze the pod through with effort. Beyond lay the central laboratory, a vast circular chamber dominated by equipment that predated modern council technology, and its center stood a massive cylindrical structure connected to the ceiling by thick power conduits. "Is that what I think it is?" Raylan asked, wheeling the pod toward the apparatus. "The neural augmentation chamber." Nera confirmed, designed to enhance psychic potential through direct cerebral stimulation. "This is what they use to test subjects before applying the artifact. Will it help us break your paralysis, maybe? Or it might kill us both." A note of dark humor colored her mental voice. "Shall we find out?" Ren positioned the pod beside the chamber's control console and began connecting systems, guided by Nara's knowledge and AA's technical assistance. The ancient machinery hummed to life circuits reactivating. "After decades of dormcancy, we need to connect your cybernetic implant directly to my neural pathways." Nara instructed. "The chamber will amplify the connection, potentially creating enough energy to disrupt the artifact's hold." "And if it overloads my implant?" Raylan asked, already knowing the answer. "Brain death would be the most merciful outcome." "Comforting," he muttered. Preparing the necessary connections, the station rocked with another explosion. Closer this time. Alarms shrieked new warnings as emergency. Bulkheads began sealing throughout the structure. "Hunter teams have breached the laboratory level." Ivy reported estimated arrival 2 minutes. Raylan worked faster, fingers flying over the controls. He removed a panel from his cybernetic implant and extended a fiber optic cable connecting it to the pod's neural interface. "Ready?" he asked, his hand hovering over the activation switch. "As ready as someone who hasn't moved in 23 years can be," she replied. He flipped the switch, energy surged through, the connection making his implant burn with white-hot intensity. Rail and gasped, knees buckling, as Nara's consciousness flooded his mind more completely than ever. Before her thoughts, memories and emotions cascaded through him like a tidal wave, overwhelming, exhilarating, terrifying. Through their shared perception, they felt the hunters approach. 12 minds focused on a single purpose, closing in from multiple directions. They sensed the station's failing systems, the microscopic fissures spreading through its whole as space itself pressed inward, and they felt the artifacts hold on Nara, not just physical paralysis, but a complex energetic binding that had imprisoned her potential for decades. "It's not enough," Nara realized, frustration bleeding through their link. "The chamber's power output is insufficient to break the seal." The laboratory doors exploded inward. 3 black-armored hunters advanced through, the smoke weapons raised behind them. More figures moved in the shadows. "Step away from the equipment," commanded the lead hunter, his helmet distorting his voice into a mechanical growl. "By order of the Shadow Conclave, you are sentenced to immediate termination." Rylan placed himself between the hunters and Nara's pod, his nearly depleted pulse. Pistol aimed at the lead figure. "You'll have to go through me." "That was always the plan," the hunter replied coldly. 3 weapons discharged simultaneously. Raylan dodged the first blast, deflected the second with his forearm guard, but the third caught him squarely in the side. Searing pain erupted through his abdomen as the energy blast burned through flesh and muscle. He staggered, firing back wildly. His shot caught a hunter in the shoulder, spinning him backward. The other 2 advanced, methodically precise in their movements. Raylan crashed against the pod, leaving a smear of blood. On its pristine surface, his vision blurred, the cybernetic implant struggling to compensate for his failing physiology. "Target is compromised," one hunter reported, moving to secondary objective through the haze of pain. Raylan saw them approach Nara's pod weapons reconfigured to destroy rather than disable with desperate strength. He lunged at the nearest hunter, grappling with inhuman strength, born of pure will. They crashed to the floor, struggling for control of the weapon the second hunter took. Aim at Raylan's back, the shot burned through his shoulder, sending him sprawling beside Nara's pod. Blood pulled beneath him as he struggled to remain conscious. Raylan Nara's mental voice was frantic, now straining against her immobile body. "Get up, can't," he gasped, feeling life draining from the wound in his side. "I'm sorry." The hunters positioned themselves around the pod, preparing for the final execution. With the last of his strength, Raylan dragged himself up, fumbling with the pods. "Emergency release, what are you doing?" Nara demanded. "Plan B," he mumbled, blood staining his teeth. "Always have a backup." The pod seal hissed open for the first time in 23 years. Nara's body was exposed to open air. Raylan pulled himself half into the pod, his blood smearing across the white surface. "Stop him!" the lead hunter shouted, rushing forward. Too late. With his remaining strength, Raylan pressed his lips to Nara's forehead, a final gesture of acceptance of connection beyond the neural link. "I see you," he whispered against her skin. "All of you." The contact ignited something ancient and powerful. Energy cascaded through their connection. Not from the machine, but from within them. The artifact seal, weakened by weeks of their mental bonding, shattered. Completely under this most human of connections, Nara's eyes flew open wide, glowing with accumulated psychic energy. Her back arched as power surged through her long, dormant nervous system. The hunters froze, weapons half raised as the air around the pod began to shimmer with violet light. Her hand moved slowly at first, then with increasing confidence to touch Raylan's blooded face. Her fingers trembled slightly against his skin. "Terminate them both," the lead hunter commanded, breaking the momentary spell. Nara's gaze shifted to the hunters, her eyes incandescent with power. "No," she said aloud, her voice from disuse but vibrating with authority. "Not anymore." She rose from the pod for the first time in 20 years, her movements initially awkward, but gaining fluidity with each. Second, the white bodysuit highlighted her perfect form as she stepped out, silver hair cascading around her violet shoulders. "Target is mobile, a hunter," shouted into his commune. "Repeat. The princess is free." Nara finished, her voice growing stronger. She knelt beside Raylan's crumpled form, cradling his head. "I was never paralyzed. I was imprisoned," she explained to him, tenderness mixing with rage in her expression. "You freed me because you didn't try to fix me, you simply accepted me." The hunters opened fire simultaneously. Nara raised one hand almost casually, stopping the energy blasts mid-air. They hung suspended, crackling with frustrated potential. 23 years, she said, her voice deceptively calm. 23 years of watching, learning, waiting. Did you think I was just lying there with a flick of her wrist? She sent the energy blasts back toward their sources. 2 hunters disintegrated instantly. The third scrambled backward frantically, reporting to unseen commanders. "The Conclave knows," he stammered. "They'll burn this entire sector to contain you." "Let them try," Nara replied. She turned her attention back to Raylan, whose breathing had grown shallow and ragged. Placing her hands over his wounds, she closed her eyes. In concentration, a soft glow emanated from her palms, spreading into his damaged tissues. "I'm not sure I can," he began, blood bubbling from his lips. "Hush," she commanded. "You kept me alive for weeks against impossible odds. Now it's my turn." The regenerative energy poured from her into him, knitting torn flesh, repairing damaged organs, restoring lost blood. Raylan gasped as strength returned to his limbs, the excruciating pain fading to a dull ache. "How?" he asked, staring at his healed side in disbelief. "The paralysis was a containment spell designed to prevent me from accessing my true power," she explained, helping him to his feet. "I'm a once-in-a-millennium psychic nexus capable of manipulating reality itself. The artifact wasn't a curse. It was a key that activated my abilities prematurely when I was a child. I couldn't control it. The council feared what I might become, so they locked me away, rather than help me develop the station's communication system." Crackled to life, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Attention, Princess Narratives and Raylan Corvus," announced a cold, formal voice. This is Arch-Counselor Darth of the Shadow. Conclave, your actions constitute treason against the Galactic Council. Surrender immediately, or face orbital bombardment. Through the laboratory's viewport, Raylan saw multiple warships emerging from hyperspace, sleek deadly vessels bearing Council insignia. The station sensors registered targeting systems locking onto their position. They're not bluffing, he said. Checking the readouts, those ships carry enough firepower to vaporize this entire station. Nara smiled, a predatory expression that transformed her beautiful face perfect. Now they're all in one place. She closed her eyes, extending her awareness beyond the confines of the station through their still active neural link. Raylan felt her consciousness expanding outward, touching the minds aboard each vessel, accessing their systems through pure psychic will. "What are you doing?" he asked, watching in amazement as the ship's formations began to falter, showing them exactly what they feared. She replied, eyes still closed in concentration, a power they can neither control nor defeat one by one. The warship's weapon systems deactivated, navigation controls locked, communication arrays went silent. The mighty Council fleet hung in space, rendered impotent by a single mind now, Nara said. Opening here as we negotiate in the Council's Grand Chamber 3 days later, representatives from 17 systems gathered in unprecedented emergency session. The massive hall hummed with tension as Nara and Raylan stood before the assembly, no longer fugitives but conquerors. The Shadow Conclave members had been exposed.